Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my top 25 books of 2025. We're just gonna jump right into it, starting with place number 25, which is We Used to Live Here. This is a thriller and the synopsis of this book is crazy. Basically, we have this couple that just moved into this house and our main character is home alone when this dad knocks on her door and says, hey, like, I used to live here, do you mind if I show my kids around? And she's like, sure. Basically, long story short, she lets them into her house and like they have a look around and some crazy things kind of go down. This was one of those thrillers that I actually listened to it and I feel like 90% of the time while I was listening to it, I was like, what is going on? Like, this is so crazy. I love a good thriller and I'm probably going to say that I love every single one of these books and that I recommend them all, but just know that I do. Both of those things are true for all of the books I'm about to talk about today. So next I have number 24. This is Remarkably Bright Creatures. I loved this book. It is very character focused and you actually get the point of view from an octopus, and I love animals and I also don't like the zoo, and this octopus lives in an aquarium, or yeah, an aquarium. So it's really interesting to hear his point of view as someone that does not really like those kind of zoos or aquatic centers. I just don't love like walking around them. So it's interesting to hear like the craziness that he gets up to while he is living in this aquarium situation. You also get the point of view of a couple other characters, but there's a character in this book that you get the point of view of and she is so sweet. She's really going through it. And I feel like I don't normally read books where the main character is older, and I think she was, I don't know, maybe like 65 or 70. I'm not entirely sure, but she was so sweet and I loved their dynamic. And then the next book I have kind of feels like an honorable mention because I did really enjoy it, but I also feel like it was one of those books that was like right book, right time kind of moment, and this is Lemon Gelato. I feel like most people have heard of this book because it's so popular. It is a YA romance and I read it this summer, and I actually read it right before my family, I didn't go with them because I had just started a new job, but right before my family went on a trip to Italy. So I feel like I was like kind of living vicariously through the book and then through also my family's trip to Italy. But it was so sweet, and I unfortunately feel like I'm aging out of like YA romance, so I'm glad that I read this when I did. Okay. My cat just ran into my tripod, so that's what that was. But anyway, our main character Lena, can you stop? Okay, anyway, our main character Lena is kind of going through a lot. She just lost her mom to cancer, but it was kind of like her mom's dying wish for her to spend a summer in Italy, and you kind of learn why. And it's just really sweet following her and her journey in Italy. I'm gonna move this back. I feel like that was like that. I don't know. Also, I feel like I got so excited and just like hopped right into it. I meant to say that I read 146 books this year, and I'm definitely going to go through all those books and do a video on every single book I read this year, but I just wanted to mention that. I meant to do that in the beginning and I just got excited to talk about my books, okay? Anyway, next book is another YA romance. This is The Do-Over. And again, I think I read this book at the perfect point. I read it right before Valentine's Day, and this book is the groundhog trope, so they are repeating Valentine's Day over and over again in this book. So I think that this is the perfect book to read right before Valentine's Day or even on Valentine's Day. So I highly recommend doing that. I feel like it adds to the story a lot, but basically on the very first Valentine's Day, our main character sees her boyfriend cheating on her, and so she's just kind of like, what? And she basically relives this horrible day over and over and over and over again. And I realized I actually do really like the groundhog trope. Now granted, I feel like the book can't be super long or it gets very repetitive, but I didn't feel like this book got repetitive at all, although it was predictable at some points in my opinion. But I feel like a romance, at least a YA romance, is going to be a little bit predictable. I mean, I feel that way with most romances, but this was really good. And like I said, definitely recommend reading it during Valentine's Day. Next I have The Villa. This is another thriller, but I actually feel like this thriller is perfect for the summertime. This book is a dual timeline, and in the present timeline you have this author who is kind of struggling. She's going through it, but her best friend is also an author and she is very successful. So there's a little bit of resentment, a little bit of, what's the word, like competition. There's a little bit of competition between them, but our main character kind of takes a deep dive into the history behind this villa. They both knew before vacationing here that this villa had a big history because back in the day there was this super famous rock star who actually stayed in the villa. And I think going into the book, all you know is that there's kind of something that went down in the past, but I don't think you know exactly what went down. So you obviously uncover that with our main character. And I think this thriller is perfect for the summer. And I'm not someone that reads a lot of thrillers in the summer, but they are vacationing somewhere in Europe. I can't remember exactly where. I think it's probably Italy if I had to guess, but I don't know. But I feel like that Italian summer vibe makes mixed with the thriller was perfect for the summer. And then my next book might be the only classic I have on this list. I'm not entirely sure, but that is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I really enjoyed this. I think that this might be one of my favorite classics. I think my favorite classic of all time is still To Kill a Mockingbird, but this one was really good. And a lot of people make connections to this book and our main character in this book to Sylvia Plath and her mental state, because you take a deep dive on mental illness in this book. So I would definitely say check the trigger warnings. But I think one of the main reasons that I really enjoyed this book was because people are linking it back to Sylvia Plath, and I have been wanting to read Sylvia Plath's unabridged journals for the longest time. So maybe I'll do that in 2026, who knows, but I really enjoyed this. It's 100% a character focused book. I feel like nothing super crazy happens, but like I said, it is pretty deep. We kind of explore some topics that are a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't remember being super uncomfortable about anything that happened in this book, and I do feel like I get that way super easily. And literally the only thing holding this back from being a 5-star read was that there were just some things that the character said that I don't agree with, you know? And yeah, I feel like that's all I can say about that without kind of going into like a rabbit hole. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of classics have things like that in them that I just don't really like. So next up, I have Love Interest by Clair Gilmore. I feel like this book just has such a special place in my heart because it is actually signed. I feel like every time I talk about this book, I talk about how it's signed, and I don't have a ton of books that are signed, okay? So this is like a special moment for me. But basically, this book is an enemies to lovers, and I feel so silly describing a romance book as an enemies to lovers, but you guys get what I mean. And basically, we have our two main characters, and they are both applying for the same job, and of course, the man gets it, okay? And our girl main character, her name is Casey, and she's kind of convinced that he just got this job because I think he has like some type of relation to maybe like a board member or someone higher up in the company. I'm not entirely sure. But then they're put on this project together, and there's obviously some resentment there because he got the job that she wanted. They click, and I just thought it was really sweet. And also I feel like this book kind of hit home because she works in finance, and I also work in finance. And I feel like I never read books where the main character works in finance, so that was a nice change of pace. And then I have The Housemaid. I feel like everyone is talking about The Housemaid right now because the movie just came out, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I will say I did not really like the rest of the series, but The Housemaid itself, this book number 1, really good. Yet another thriller. I did not realize that there were this many thrillers on the list. I feel like there's not as we get higher up on the list, maybe? I don't know. But basically our main character has some criminal history that she's basically trying to hide, but she is trying to find a job, and every job is like telling her no. Like they do background checks, you know, and they're just like, we don't hire people with a criminal past, you know. That's like what they keep saying to her, until finally she gets a job as a housemaid. And there's some really weird things going on in this house, like really weird, and she's like wanting to leave, but she can't because she can't get a job anywhere else because of her past. And I feel like that's all you should really know about this one going into it. At least personally, I like knowing as little as possible about a thriller before going into it, because I love, like, I was about to say I love the thrill. I love the thrill of a thriller. I love not knowing a ton going into a book. Next I have The Academy by Elin Hilderbrand. Elin Hilderbrand is one of my favorite authors, and she wrote this with her daughter, I think it's Shelby Cunningham, and I feel like they must have worked perfectly together because this book takes place at an academy, so it's a high school, and I think it's maybe in Vermont, I'm not entirely sure, but the cover was perfect fall vibe, so you already know I read it in the fall. But I feel like her daughter was able to bring so much of like the younger slang and like how younger people interact to the story, because Elin Hilderbrand normally writes about like moms or people older in life, but like true Elin Hilderbrand fashion, you get the point of views from so many different characters in this book. And I do feel like it is pretty character focused with a subplot of this mystery romance aspect going on. Like I said, it's very Elin Hilderbrand coded in that sense, but I feel like her daughter brought such a uniqueness to this book. So I will definitely be reading the next book when that one comes out. I think it's going to be a duology. It might be a trilogy. I'm not entirely sure, but I need to read it because I feel like we did not kind of tie things off with a nice neat bow at the end of the book. But the end did get a little wild. I was like, these decisions that you guys are making, insane, but I loved it. So next I have Promise Me Sunshine. What a good book. Like, I normally don't like books that explore grief, and this book explores grief a lot, but it did it in a way that didn't make me like overly sad and not want to read the book. It did it in a way that was kind of like, I want to say it was just perfect, you know, like it's hard to describe, but it just did it right. Basically, we have our main character and she's drowning in her grief, and she is really struggling to basically take care of herself, to do really anything, and she is nannying for this family, and I believe it might be her first time nannying for them because she meets the daughter that she's nannying, his uncle, and they immediately butt heads. He's kind of like judging her hardcore, but then he kind of learns more about her and what's going on with her, and she's just kind of trying to navigate her grief and come back above water, and the friendship that blossoms between them is absolutely amazing. And I just feel like this was one of those romance books where I was like, yeah, their connection came first, and I feel like personally I want the connection to come first, you know? So I really appreciated that, and like I said, there's a lot going on in her life, so she felt very fleshed out as a character. Like, these people felt so real to me. Also, it takes place in New York City, and I feel like I just love a book that takes place in New York City. We are now in top 15 territory with One of Us Is Next, which I was shocked that I liked this book so much because I did like One of Us Is Lying, but I wasn't obsessed with it, so I figured I'm not gonna like love the next book in the series, but my library had it available, so I was like, I'm just gonna download it and see what I think. Why did I love this book? You're following like a younger set of characters that went to the same high school as the people in One of Us Is Lying, and if you don't know anything about One of Us Is Lying, I believe it's now a TV show, potentially on Hulu? I don't know, I might have made that up, but I read that book earlier this year, and like I said, didn't love it, but I wanted to reread it before watching the TV show, and I obviously still have not watched the TV show. But basically in that book you have this mystery because a whole group of teenagers is in detention, and one of the main characters, his name is Simon, and he writes this blog basically gossiping about all these bad things that people do in the school, and so he's got a long list of haters, you know, but he basically drops dead in detention, and so everyone's kind of like pointing the finger like, who did it, and everyone's kind of narrowing in on this group of people that was in detention with them. And then like I said, One of Us Is Next is following a different group of characters that goes to that high school, but one of them is like the sister of one of the characters in One of Us Is Lying. I feel like I just did a really bad job of describing that, but I'm trying to be as like bare minimum information as possible. Next I have Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. This book took me by surprise. Now listen, I love Holly Jackson, but I was not expecting this book to be as good as it is. Basically our main character is told, hey, you have a week to live because of something crazy that happens to her in the beginning of the book, and she is basically trying to figure out who wanted to like her, which is insane. Like, I don't know how Holly Jackson thinks of plots like these. I didn't guess anything that happens in this book, and it's crazy to me that like it can be a thriller like this and still manage to create such a bond between our main characters, and I didn't get bored at all. And I feel like normally when a thriller kind of tries to create this bond between our main characters and kind of like deep dives into the characters, I'm like, okay, that's not what I came here for, you know? But this book did it so perfectly. Holly Jackson, she did it again, okay? I loved this book. Also, I feel like again this is one of those books that I just read at the perfect time. It took place during Halloween and I read it right before Halloween. Stunning. So good. Now that I'm talking about that book, I'm like, should it be a 5-star? Maybe. But the next book, I'm kind of embarrassed that it made this list, to be honest. I'm actually not kind of embarrassed. I am definitely embarrassed that it made this list, okay? This is Icebreaker. I'm embarrassed, like I said, but I don't know how it honestly made this list. No idea, because I don't normally like spicy books, and this book, yeah, it's very spicy. But the found family in this book, oh my gosh, it is so good. Basically, our two main characters, I think they're in college. Yes, they're definitely in college. And our main girl character, she is on like the ice figure skating team, and our main male character is on the hockey team. And they both hate each other, but they are basically forced to share a rink to practice at. And that's kind of the whole reason that they even start talking to each other in the first place. I believe they hated each other before they even like actually had a conversation with each other, but it was so good. How many times did I say so good? Anyway, the next two books I have are actually Emily Henry books, but we're gonna start with People We Met on Vacation. This is a second chance romance, and there is just something about a second chance romance that I eat up every single time. I love second chance romance so much. But basically you have our main character, and she works for this travel magazine, and so she basically gets to go on a bunch of different vacations for free, and she normally brings her like best male friend. I can't remember his name. I'm so bad at names. I feel like you can tell in this video. I don't remember the names of any of these characters, but basically they haven't talked in a really long time until all of a sudden she's like, hey, do you want to go on this trip with me? And basically like bad thing after bad thing keeps happening on this trip, and it's just so good. I love Emily Henry, as you can tell, because I have another book to talk about from her. This is Funny Story. I think that this is now like 2 years old at this point, but I read it I think at the beginning of 2025. But you have our two main characters and they're kind of thrown together because they both were dating other people, and then all of a sudden their significant others were like, no, let's break up, and they got together instead. You know what I mean? So they start living together basically as like a, we don't have anything else. Like we were living with our significant others and they just left us for each other. And so they're obviously both going through this really hard breakup. And I feel like with that synopsis, it kind of makes it seem like, why would you like root for them? Like they need to kind of figure out their own problems and like their emotions after this breakup. But it was so good. So good. How many times am I gonna say that? But it was. I'm getting like giddy thinking about it. I love Emily Henry and the way that she writes and the way she makes her characters. They just feel so realistic, and this book was, yeah, it was good. It was good. Next we have How to Walk Away by Katherine. Basically in this book, something really devastating, very life-changing happens to our character in the very beginning of the book, and she is trying to navigate this throughout the entire book. Like so very life-changing. I don't know if it says it on the back of the book, but I feel like you probably should not know about it. But basically this really big thing happens to her and she is navigating her new life after that, and she's basically in the hospital for a really long time. And I don't know if this book is marketed as a romance, but I would definitely say it's more literary fiction with a subplot of romance. And if you haven't read any Katherine books, which I hadn't before I picked this book up, wait, this actually might be the only book I've read by her, but I feel like she managed to write about this really heavy topic and it didn't like fully break me. You know what I mean? Like I feel like a lot of books that are super sad like this, I just like put it down and I'm just like, oh, like life sucks, like this was horrible, blah. But this was not like that at all. It just made me feel like there was hope in the really horrible things that happen in life that like you obviously have no control over. And yeah. I need to stop doing that. I keep ending my sentences like that. I gotta stop. The next book, I'm also like, why is this not a 5-star? This is Sunrise on the Reaping. I cannot wait to see this movie. This basically follows Hamish's story, and I feel like everyone knows about this book, so I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this book, but it follows his story going into the Hunger Games. And I feel like this book specifically reignited my love for the Hunger Games. Like I want to go back and reread all the books and rewatch all the movies. Like I want to go into a deep rabbit hole of the Hunger Games because this book was just so good, and it's definitely one of those books that I could see myself rereading again in the future. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is All In, but I also want to say I really loved Bad Blood. This is the Natural series, so honestly pretty much all of these books I want to talk about, but All In and Bad Blood were both 4.5 stars for me. But I think this entire series I did not rate a book below 4 stars. Basically this is a YA series and our main characters are in high school, but they are helping the FBI solve cases because they all have these like abilities that help them to solve cases. And I feel like that makes it sound like it's kind of fantasy-esque, but it's not. It's just kind of like the way that their brains work, the FBI uses them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it is so good. And I realized I love a mystery where you're like solving a case, and this series particularly, they have like this overarching story that goes throughout the entire books. And also there's of course a little bit of a romance. You already know I love a little bit of a romance in my books, so that was like the perfect mix of genres to me. Lessons in chemistry. Basically you have our main character who is a scientist, and I think this takes place, what is it, the 60s? I'm not entirely sure, but it takes place like way back in the day, so it is historical fiction. And since she is a woman like back in the day, nobody takes her seriously. Everyone's like, you're not a scientist, and she's like yes I am, like aha, you know? And it takes a deep dive into her character, and I feel like that synopsis itself makes it sound like this book is like boring, you know? Like it's not super sciencey at all. Like I'm reading Project Hail Mary right now. Oh my gosh, that is so sciencey. This one is not like that at all. So don't let like the science aspect of it scare you. Next I have Part of Your World, which I always want to sing the title of this book, but I'm not going to. But this book is yet another romance. I'm a sucker for romance, okay? I didn't realize until I made this list I am such a sucker for romance, but but this might have been my favorite romance, well, second favorite romance of the year. But you have our main character who basically her car breaks down and our MMC helps her fix her car, but she ends up stopping for food in this super small town where like this guy helped her fix her tire, and basically they kind of hit it off, but they are literally polar opposites. I believe that she's a doctor and her whole family kind of comes from like this background of doctors, and she has a lot of pressure on her to like be not only like a super great doctor but to work at this specific hospital, and he kind of runs this in, and they live pretty far apart. I don't think it's like super far. I remember being driving distance, but there's just some things that are like stacked against them, you know? So they kind of have to deal with that, but amazing. Abby Jimenez does it again, let me just say. We are in top 5 category. Another author that I love is Marissa Meyer. Honestly, I want to talk about the entire Lunar Chronicles series, but I think Crest was my highest rated book of the series, but I can't talk much about this book. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th book in the series. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will tell you about Cinder, which is the 1st book in the series. This entire series is fairy tale retellings. So the 1st book is a Cinderella retelling, and it's like a fairy tale retelling mixed with YA and fantasy because our main character is, I think it's a cyborg. Is that what they're called? No, that feels wrong. Maybe. I don't know, but she's made of like partly metals, and the society really frowns upon like people that are like that. Like they're kind of outcasts. And so of course her evil stepmom is like outcasting her because she's part cyborg. But I love this entire series so much. I read it originally in middle school and then I reread most of the books this year. I think Crest might have been the first book that I stopped reading in middle school. I think I read like half of it and then just never finished it. So I finished that this year. And of course it was so good. The next book is actually my only non-fiction book in this entire video. This is Dinner for Vampires. I think that this was my very first 5-star of the year, and her story is insane. She literally grew up in a cult, and I highly recommend listening to the audiobook of this one. I feel like there's not a ton I can say, but her story is like, I'm literally getting goosebumps thinking about this book. And I listened to the audiobook and she actually narrates it, so hearing these things that happened to her that she was going through while like being an actress and filming TV shows, it is actually crazy to me. And it's truly like, you don't really know what people are going through, especially these actors, because I feel like a lot of the times we can put actors up on pedestals and just like not even know anything about their backstory and what they're going through. So highly recommend listening to this one. I love listening to audiobooks where we are actually like hearing the author narrate it. Top 3. This is actually a book I read very, very recently. This is Catabasis. I had no expectations going into this book. I've never read anything like this before, except I did read Dante's Divine Comedy, and she does take a lot of like inspiration from Divine Comedy and a bunch of other books that she lists in here, but you definitely do not have to read those other books to read this book. I feel like there was some discourse online that was like, oh yeah, you should read that. You do not have to at all, but I will say this book is very heavy on like the academia, because our 2 main characters are both, I think they're getting their masters in magic, which is so cool, and their advisor dies, and so they say, hey, I'm gonna go into the depths of down there and I'm going to save him. And so you follow them in their journey, and this was so good. Me and my friends have a book club, and one of my friends had not read any of the works that kind of inspired this author to read this book, and she still really enjoyed it. So like I said, you definitely don't have to read any of the other works that this author was inspired by to read this book. And then right at the number 2 spot, I have Scarlet Angel. This was book number 3 in the Mind series, and I honestly want to talk about this entire series because books 3, 4, and 5 were all 5 stars for me, and then I think books 1 and 2 were 4 stars. But this series is so good. Like, I want to get the physical copy simply because I love this series so much. But basically our main character is a serial, and she falls for an FBI agent that is working her case. I'm just like getting so excited talking about it. This book, oh my gosh, it is so good. It's like a thriller mystery mixed with romance, and I love when books mix those genres together. Like, I think that's like my perfect cup of tea, you know? And I feel like that's kind of all you should know about these books before you go into them. Also, these books were so popular so long ago, so if you have not read them yet, this is your sign too. And now my camera is overheating, so I have to be quick about my last book, but I feel like if you watch my channel this year, you know Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home was my favorite book of the year. I am obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with the romance in this book. I honestly, like, I want to just exist in this world with these two characters together and that's it. But this is book 3, 4, I don't know. It's into a series, but basically I feel like all you should know about the series is that it's kind of similar to Gossip Girl in the sense that they live in England and they're rich and they are in a toxic romance. I feel like it's really important to know that they are in a toxic romance before reading this book because I feel like that kind of helps. I feel like if I went into this series thinking that it was just going to be like a sweet, fun little romance book, I would be very disappointed. But it was not sweet, not fun, very toxic. You follow a couple different romances throughout this series because you have books that are following Magnolia Parks and then you have books that are following Daisy Haynes, and it's just amazing. I love the way that these two kind of like, they're almost like interconnected series and I kind of love how they ebb and flow. But this book, I'm already thinking like, when can I reread this book? Like, it was so good. But those are my top 25 books of 2025. Let me know what books you're excited for in 2026. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!